Last year's WrestleMania 18 was the first WWE wrestling game to make its way to the GameCube. The game was developed by Yuke, the developers of the SmackDown series on the PlayStation 2, rather than the Aki Corporation, who had traditionally been the N64 wrestling developer for THQ. The game was sort of a conglomeration between the SmackDown style of game and the Aki style of game, in that it was more methodically paced, but it contained more arcade gameplay mechanics, sort of like the SmackDown games. Overall, the game was not terribly well received. Most people thought it just wasn't terribly exciting, wasn't as polished as most of the other WWE games on the market, and it was not a rousing success among most wrestling fans. This year, THQ has released WrestleMania 19, the follow-up to WrestleMania 18, and what they've aimed to do here is sort of take the game in more of the Aki direction, and also to sort of polish up the overall presentation and kind of add in some new modes and just sort of overall boost the WrestleMania experience. For the most part, WrestleMania 19 is a lot like WrestleMania 18, but they've definitely sort of taken some liberties with the Aki engine and sort of basically ripped off some of the core mechanics from the Aki engine and brought it over to this game. The main mechanic they've taken for this year's game is the weak and strong grappling system. Basically what this entails is to do a weak strike or a weak grapple, you simply press the corresponding button and just sort of tap it. Whereas if you want to do a stronger version of a strike or a stronger grapple move, you hold the button down and you'll perform the move. Overall, there's a lot more moves in the game. There's about double the grappling moves from last year's game, and a number of new flying moves, a number of new off-the-rope attacks, a bunch of new special finisher moves. They've really bulked up the roster of maneuvers and such in the game. Overall, the game does feel a little bit faster than WrestleMania 18 did, but not so much as to really make it an arcade game in any fashion. The other Aki-inspired element they've included in this year's game is the addition of location-specific damage. This was pretty much missing in last year's game, and they brought it back for WrestleMania 19. What this entails is that performing submissions or location-specific moves, knee drops or arm breakers, that sort of thing, will cause damage to that specific area of your opponent. So, if you just keep working the arms, eventually your opponent's going to start grimacing and start holding his arm, and that'll make him much more prone to tapping out if you do any more moves on that arm. One thing that hasn't changed is the game's use of the momentum meter to determine how you perform in a match. The momentum meter is placed sort of above your energy meter, and it works on a color scale. So when you're in kind of the green and the blue, that means you're not doing so hot. But when you kind of get in the yellow, red, orange area, that means you're pretty much on fire. When your momentum meter's high, you're pretty much unstoppable. You can reverse attacks easier, you can climb the cage faster, you can get up ladders faster, that sort of thing. When your momentum meter's down, if you've been taking an extended beating or something, you're going to have a pretty hefty uphill battle ahead of you, as it takes a while to build that meter back up. The game's special system is pretty much untouched from last year's game. Your energy meter will basically fill throughout the game as you perform more and more moves on your opponent. Once that meter fills up, you'll hit your special state, and in order to enact a special state, all you have to do is just press the grapple and strike buttons at the same time, and then once you grapple your opponent again, you'll perform your special move. Special moves can be performed from pretty much anywhere. Wrestlers have, probably around 3 to 4 different special moves. So The Rock, when he's standing over a downed opponent over his head, you'll be able to perform the people's elbow, and when you're in a standing front grapple, you'll be able to perform the rock bottom. Another aspect of the game that hasn't really changed that much is the game's AI system, which last year was very tough, but in kind of a cheap way that not a lot of people were really stoked on. This has not changed a lot, especially in multiplayer matches. The game's AI is still pretty cheap and still spends a lot more time beating up on you than it does any other computer opponents. Fortunately, in matches like cage matches and ladder matches, the AI seems to be a little bit more forgiving this time around. It doesn't quite have the same ability to magically jump up and shake you off the cage no matter how bad you've beaten them down. Though occasionally it does seem like this is for the worse, as we saw some instances where an opposing player would be climbing up the ladder and be reaching for the belt, and the CPU opponent would just be standing there not doing anything about it whatsoever. WrestleMania 19 has pretty much all the standard match types that you'd expect from a modern-day wrestling game. You got your standard normal, tag, handicap, three-way, fatal four-way, and Royal Rumble matches. There's also a King of the Ring mode, which is a 4 to 16 wrestler elimination tournament that you can set up either for one of the championship belts or just as a standalone tournament. However, the biggest game mode addition to the WrestleMania 19 has got to be the Revenge mode, which is the game's story mode. Revenge is set up in such a way where when the game begins, you are kind of in this first-person perspective, and you're looking around and you're being dragged out of an arena by two security guards. They're sort of like making fun of you and telling you that, you know, you've been fired by Mr. McMahon and that you're not to ever show your face around the WWE again. And then they kind of give you this sort of rude toss out the door onto the concrete, and you're out. You're out of the WWE. When you look up, you see Stephanie McMahon kind of hovering over you, and she says that she's got a job offer for you. What she'll do is she'll offer you a contract, which entails a number of different tasks that will help you extract your revenge and also help her get back at her father. What's unique about the Revenge mode is that very little, if any, of it takes place in the ring. All the main missions in the game take place in locations outside of the ring. You'll have like a shopping mall you'll be in, there will be like a harbor, there's a parking lot, and then there's a construction site. There's 6 missions for each level, and most of these missions basically entail you beating up blue-collar employees of Vince McMahon, like construction workers and security guards and random people like that. There's 2 really big problems with the Revenge mode. The first of which is that straight up, it's just not very fun to play. None of the missions are particularly interesting, and they're all really repetitive. Like, you'll just be doing the same basic tasks over and over again, just kind of throwing dudes off of a ledge or just running from one part of the level to another while beating guys up. Occasionally you'll have to like jump and swing from a chain or something, but none of it really makes any kind of contextual sense in a wrestling game, and it just all feels really out of place and weird. The other big problem with the Revenge mode kind of goes back to the game's problematic AI, which basically all the bad guys, you know, despite the fact that they're like construction workers and security guards and like sort of lowly, you know, the guys who set up the ring and that sort of stuff, they all know how to wrestle good, because they work for the WWE, they get free wrestling training or something. So you'll have like these construction workers performing like, you know, The Rock's signature punches and like spinning toe holds and things like that. And it's really strange how difficult those guys are, and especially considering how they all tend to gang up on you at one point or another in each mission. It's really frustrating and a lot of times really impossible to get certain tasks done in any kind of timely fashion. Thankfully, the game does kind of make up for the shoddy Revenge mode with a really good Creator Wrestler. Last year's Creator Wrestler didn't have much to it. This year's is basically like a stripped-down version of SmackDown's Shut Your Mouth's Creator Wrestler function. It's got most of the same moves, pretty much all the same appearance and logic attributes that you can edit. The game has sort of an unlockable mode called the Shop Zone, where you can that is sort of modeled after the WWE's own merchandise store. The problem is the only way you can earn cash to buy the unlockables is that you have to play through the Revenge mode in order to get any cash, and you'll probably have to play through it at least a couple of times to get enough cash to unlock everything. WrestleMania 19 is a graphical improvement over WrestleMania 18, but only kind of a marginal one. Yuke has done a great job of giving each wrestler his or her own trademark features like tattoos. The faces all look a lot less generic now. All in all the wrestlers look like they're supposed to and are almost on par with the SmackDown character models. Most of the animations from last year's game have kind of traipsed their way into this year's game. There are some new move animations and a couple of new facial animations here and there, but overall it's pretty much the same stuff you found in WrestleMania 18. The biggest improvement in WrestleMania 19 has got to be its sound quality, which in WrestleMania 18, the sound was pretty non-existent. Most of the wrestler themes weren't even in the game. The in-game music was pretty atrocious. This has all been fixed. Nearly every official theme song for each wrestler is in the game. It's all in pretty good sound quality. Most of the in-game music still isn't super great, but it's a lot better than what was in last year's game. It's still kind of generic rock and hardcore techno, but it does the job and feels right for the game. Most of the in-game effects have been redone largely, so they sound a lot more realistic and kind of actually sound like most of the sound effects found in the SmackDown games. All in all, WrestleMania 19 is an improvement over WrestleMania 18, but it's not a big one. The gameplay is a lot more solid this year, and the creative wrestler is a whole lot better, so you'll find a lot more longevity in the game. Unfortunately, the revenge mode really is pretty terrible and is probably going to turn a lot of people off to the game, especially considering the fact that you're going to have to play through it if you want to unlock anything. And there are some polish issues here and there with the graphics, but all in all, it is the best WWE game on the GameCube, and if you are a WWE fan who owns a GameCube, you should not pass this one up.